On a cold Thursday evening in downtown Chicago, inside a quiet restaurant of white linen and low amber light, Diane Merritt sat alone at a corner table. The ice in her untouched glass melted without a sound. 25 minutes had passed. No text, no apology. At 43, she ran an $80 million commercial real estate empire, and tonight, she was being stood up on what she had sworn would be her last blind date. She rose, slipped her arms into her coat, and turned toward the door. It opened before she could reach it. Nathan Reed stepped inside, shirt-wrinkled sawdust still clinging to his forearms, a small pink backpack slung over one shoulder. He crossed the room without hesitation, stopped at her table, and held her eyes. What he said next was not an apology. It was a single sentence, and it changed everything. You deserve more than a man who opens with an excuse. The sentence landed in the space between them, like a stone dropped into still water. For a moment, Diane Merritt forgot that her coat was already on. She forgot the 25 minutes she had spent rehearsing in perfect corporate cadence, the words she would later text Sandra. Last one, I kept my promise, never again. She even forgot briefly that her keys were in her hand. The man standing across from her did not apologize. He did not smile. He simply waited the way a craftsman waits for wood to settle before he cuts into it. The waiter hovered unsure. Around them, the soft clink of silverware resumed slow and careful, as though the other diners had collectively decided to pretend they had not been listening. Diane set her keys on the table. She did not know yet why she sat back down. Her name carried weight in Chicago. Merritt Commercial had started 12 years earlier in a leased office above a laundromat in Lincoln Park. Now it occupied 3 floors of a glass tower on Wacker Drive and held a portfolio valued at just over $80 million. Trade publications like to call her the cold architect of the West Loop, a phrase she found lazy and inaccurate. She was not cold, she was careful, and there was a difference no one seemed willing to learn. Careful was what a woman became when she trusted the wrong man once. His name had been Marcus, and 8 years ago he had been charming, well-dressed, and precisely the kind of partner a 35-year-old rising developer was supposed to want. He had also been, as she discovered the morning her attorney called the quiet second signatory, on a $4 million deal she had built from scratch, a deal he had redirected into a shell company registered under his brother's name. Using her introductions, her reputation, her Rolodex, she had not cried. She had restructured. She had paid a team of lawyers for 14 months and recovered most of the money, and none of the part of herself that had believed foolishly in shared futures. After that, Diane Merritt had decided she was a woman best understood through her work, which was why when Sandra, her oldest friend, the one person alive who remembered her before the armor, began nagging her about dating again, Diane had answered with the flat precision she used for vendors who overpromised. 3 blind dates, she had said. I tried. They were a waste of an evening. 1 more, Sandra had countered. No, 1 more. 1 hour, 1 drink, 1 chance. And if it's a disaster, I will never bring it up again. Not at your birthday. Not at Christmas. Not on my deathbed. Diane had laughed despite herself. Your deathbed is going to be very quiet. 1 more, Diane. Please. I met him through a client whose dining table he built. I would not send you to a man I had not looked in the eye. And so against every instinct she had sharpened into steel, she had agreed to the 4th. The last. She had picked the restaurant herself, a place she knew neutral ground, with lighting low enough to hide a bad hour and an exit near the bar. She had dressed the way she dressed for board meetings, charcoal-tailored, no jewelry beyond the small gold studs her mother had left her. At 7, she had ordered sparkling water. At 7:15, she had begun composing Sandra's text. At 7:25, the door had opened, and a man with sawdust on his forearms had walked straight across the restaurant and said the only sentence that could have kept her in that chair. Nathan, he said, now sitting down across from her without waiting for permission. He did not extend his hand. Nathan Reed. You're late. I know. 25 minutes. 27 by my watch. He glanced at the leather band on his wrist, plain scratched. I'm not going to give you the reason because if I do, you will weigh it, and you will decide whether it was a good enough excuse. And the entire evening will be about whether I deserve to be here. I would rather not start that way. Diane studied him. This was not a line. A line required a certain performance, a small lift at the corner of the mouth, a calibrated beat to let the charm settle. This man was delivering the sentence the way he might describe a hinge, because it was accurate. The small pink backpack was still on the chair beside him. He had set it down with a kind of unconscious care, the way a person sets down something that belongs to someone small. She filed the detail away without remarking on it. Sandra told me you build furniture. I do. She said you own a shop. In Berwyn, 6 employees, mostly custom pieces, dining tables, built-ins, the occasional church pew when the Methodists can afford one. And you came straight from work. He looked down at his forearms as if registering the sawdust for the first time. I was finishing a walnut countertop for a client in Oak Park. It needed to cure tonight, or the stain would lift on Monday. I decided the countertop was more important than changing my shirt. An interesting priority for a blind date. An honest one. The waiter reappeared. Nathan ordered black coffee. Diane watched him the way she watched a new tenant on a walkthrough. Not suspicious exactly, but alert to the gap between what a person said and what a person was. There was no gap. That was the problem. Every man she had met in the last 8 years had walked into a room measuring it. They adjusted their voice for the acoustics. They located her priced, her decided on an angle. Marcus had done it so beautifully, she had not realized it was happening until the deposition. Nathan Reed was not measuring anything. He was sitting in the chair, the way a person sits in his own kitchen at the end of a long day. I should tell you, Diane said, that I agreed to 1 hour and 1 drink. All right. I have not yet decided whether you get the hour. Fair. He lifted his coffee when it arrived, wrapped both hands around the cup and drank. Would it help if I told you I was not planning on asking what you do for a living? Why not? Because Sandra already told me, and I don't find it relevant. The word landed oddly. Relevant. In her world, the size of the portfolio was always relevant. It was, in fact, the first fact a man established, and the last one he let go of. You don't find $80 million relevant. I find it impressive, Nathan said. I don't find it relevant to whether I want to have coffee with you. She looked at him for a long moment. He did not look away. He did not try to fill the quiet with something clever. He simply drank his coffee and waited the way a man waits for a train he is not especially anxious to catch. They spoke for 40 minutes. She did not notice the 40 minutes pass. She noticed afterward that the water in her glass had gone entirely flat, and that the waiter had stopped coming by. He told her about Berwyn in a handful of plain sentences. A brick shop on a side street, a dog that slept under the table, saw a daughter who was turning 7 in March. He did not elaborate on the daughter. He did not perform grief or single fatherhood, or the quiet heroism some men tried to wear like a coat. He mentioned her the way he had mentioned the dog as a fact of his life, requiring neither pity nor applause. Diane, who had arrived prepared to steer, found herself answering his small, unremarkable questions honestly. He asked what she had wanted to be at 12. He asked whether she liked her own handwriting. He did not ask a single question about her company, her net worth, or her plans for the next quarter. When the hour ended, he looked at his watch, set his empty cup down, and stood. You said 1 hour, he said. I am not going to be the man who asks for more than you offered. He pulled the pink backpack onto his shoulder. Diane felt something she had not felt in a long time. It was not attraction, not exactly. It was the small, unsettling recognition that she had been for 60 minutes, entirely unmanaged. "Sandra has my number," Nathan said. "If you want to do this again, tell her. If you don't, tell her that too. I would rather hear a clean no than a polite nothing." He nodded and walked out. Diane sat alone at the table for another 20 minutes. She was a woman who had trained herself to know in any given room exactly what she wanted and exactly what it would cost. It was the skill that had built the company. It was the skill that had kept her after Marcus from ever again mistaking interest for safety. And tonight, for the first time in 8 years, she did not know. She did not know whether she wanted to see him again. She did not know whether she wanted not to. She only knew that she was not leaving yet, and that her hand had not yet reached for her keys. Outside on Wacker Drive, the November wind was moving through the glass canyons. Inside, the ice in her glass had finished melting. The waiter finally came back. "Anything else, ma'am?" "No," Diane said. And then, to her own quiet astonishment, "Yes, another sparkling water." She was not ready yet to go home. Curiosity, she would later decide, was a more dangerous thing than desire. Desire announced itself. Curiosity simply waited with a coffee cup between its hands until you sat back down. 3 days later, Diane called Sandra. "I'll see him again." "Oh, thank God. Don't make it more than it is." "I am making it exactly what it is," Sandra said with the satisfaction of a woman who had waited 8 years for the sentence. "I'll tell him," Nathan suggested a diner. Halstead sat on a thin stretch of road above Lake Michigan and Rogers Park, a narrow place with a Formica counter vinyl booths the color of old ketchup, and a hand-lettered sign in the front window that read, "Pie made here, not trucked." Diane had eaten in 3 Michelin-starred dining rooms on 4 continents. She had never as an adult ordered pie from a rotating case. She did that Sunday morning. Nathan ordered coffee. He did not remark on her choice. They began to meet there loosely, without anything that could be called a schedule. Sometimes on a Saturday afternoon. Sometimes on a Wednesday evening. Once on a Tuesday lunch when Diane's calendar had cracked open unexpectedly, and she had, with a small private shock, texted him rather than spending the hour on email. He was always already there when she arrived. She never caught him checking his watch. He drank his coffee black. He left his phone face down on the table. He did not carry a laptop. When the radio behind the counter played a Cubs game, and it often did, because the owner was an unreconstructed North Sider who had not yet forgiven the 1980s, Nathan would tilt his head slightly toward the speaker, the way another man might glance at a beautiful woman, and then return his attention to her without comment. It was the most unguarded, small habit she had ever watched a man perform. She started testing him. The first test was a cancellation. They had plans for a Thursday. At 4 in the afternoon, she texted, "Something came up. Can't make it." She added no explanation and offered no reschedule. It was the kind of message a man like Marcus would have read 7 times, extracting meaning from each word. Nathan replied within 2 minutes. "Okay, drive safe if you're out tonight. Nothing else." No follow-up the next day. When she texted him on Saturday to suggest the diner, his response was 10 o'clock, as though the canceled Thursday had simply never occurred. The second test was money. She had bought a 5-story office building on Washington for just over $5 million, a modest acquisition by her standards, and she mentioned it in the middle of a conversation about something else. She watched his face. He set down his coffee. "That's a lot of work." "It is." "What's the tenant mix? 4 floors leased, 1 vacant. The vacancy is my problem." He thought about it for a moment. "Small architectural firm," he said. "Or a specialty clinic. Either one will pay for the build-out, and neither one will leave in a year. The trick is not to take the first offer, because the first offer is always a staffing agency trying to get out of a bad lease in the loop." She studied him across the table. "How do you know that?" "I lease my shop from a man who owns 6 buildings," Nathan said. "We talk." He did not ask what her cut of the $5 million was. He did not ask whether she owned the building free and clear. He did not follow up with a single question about her finances. He simply drank his coffee, and a minute later began describing the way a dovetail joint failed when the walnut had not been given 2 weeks to sit in a warm shop before being cut. The third test was clothing. She wore a dress to the diner on a Tuesday evening cream silk from Milan, entirely unseasonal, costlier than the truck parked outside. She wore it because she wanted to see what happened when she placed something he could not possibly afford directly in front of him. She did not overdo the rest. She did not explain. He stood when she walked in. He held her chair. "You look nice," he said the way a man remarks that the sky is blue, and then he asked her whether she wanted the peach pie or the cherry, because the peach was going to be gone within the hour. She ordered the peach. She did not know yet what was happening to her. It was a Sunday in late January when she met Ellie. She had not planned to. She had arrived at Halstead's at 9:30 on a cold morning, the lake outside pewter-colored and hostile, expecting Nathan. He was already in the booth, and so was a small girl, with her hair in 2 uneven braids. Boots kicked up on the bench beside her, a plate of half-eaten pancakes in front of her, drawing something serious on the back of a paper placemat. Nathan stood. "Diane, this is my daughter Ellie. Ellie, this is my friend Diane." Ellie looked up. She had her father's eyes steady, unblinking, unimpressed by adults. "Hi." "Hello." "Are you the lady from the restaurant with the fancy lights?" Diane looked at Nathan. "I mentioned you once," he said without elaborating. Ellie returned to her drawing. Diane sat down opposite her. Nathan did not perform fatherhood for Diane's benefit, and he did not perform his daughter. Ellie was simply there, the way the Cubs game was. There, the way the pie case was. There, a fact of the morning, not a test. When Ellie went up to the counter to ask for more syrup, Nathan spoke without turning his head. Her grandmother usually has her on Sunday mornings. Not today. "You didn't have to come?" "I know." He had come anyway. He had brought his 6-year-old daughter to meet the woman he had refused to ask anything of. He had done it without announcing it, and he would not have mentioned it at all if Diane had not happened to arrive on the one Sunday his schedule cracked. When Ellie returned with the syrup bottle clutched in both hands, she stopped at Diane's side of the booth instead of sliding back in next to her father. She studied Diane with unembarrassed concentration. "Your coat is really pretty," she said. "But it looks like it would be cold if you went outside and forgot to button it." "That's true. You should button it." Then Ellie climbed back into her seat and resumed her drawing as though she had delivered a small, necessary piece of information and was now done with it. Diane did not know what to do with her face. Something shifted inside her, quiet and small, and she did not know what to do with it either. The midpoint came on a Wednesday in March. They had eaten, they had walked the half block to the parking lot, and he was standing beside her, car hands in his coat pockets, the streetlight above them, throwing a yellow circle on the wet asphalt. She had just made a joke, a small, sharp joke, designed to put a half-inch of distance between them, and he had not laughed. "Diane." "Yes." "I want to say one thing, and then I want you to go home." She waited for him to continue. "I know you are testing me," Nathan said. "I have known for a while. I am not angry about it. I understand it. Whatever happened to you before we met, I understand it was bad enough that testing me is the only way you know how to be here." Her breath caught. "But I am not going to chase you. If you need to leave, leave cleanly. Don't dress it up. Don't make it about a schedule or a dress or a building. Just go. The one thing I will not do is spend my life convincing you I am not the man you are afraid of. That is not a conversation I am willing to have. Not with you. Not with anyone." The rain began very lightly on the roof of her car. "If you want to keep coming to Halstead's, I will be there. If you don't, I won't ask why." He stepped back. He did not touch her. He walked to his truck, climbed in, and drove out of the lot without looking back. Diane sat in the driver's seat for a long time before she turned the key. No one in her entire adult life had ever named her out loud before. 4 days later, on a Monday morning, an envelope arrived at her office. It was heavy stock, the kind of envelope lawyers used when they wanted you to know the letter inside was expensive. Her assistant had opened it, read the first paragraph, and walked it into Diane's office personally without a word. The letter had belonged to Kirkland Brown and Associates, a small firm in Naperville. The letter was signed on behalf of Mrs. Patricia Holt. The letter was a warning. It was dressed as a courtesy. Mrs. Holt, the letter explained, was the second wife of the late Raymond Reed, Nathan's father. She had recently concluded an estate dispute in the probate court of DuPage County, the outcome of which had redirected a significant portion of the Reed estate to the decedent's children from his first marriage. Nathan Reed, as a named beneficiary, had received $350,000 in early September. The letter's final paragraph was the only one that mattered. The firm had become aware, the letter said through the ordinary course of its inquiries, that Mr. Reed had recently formed a personal association with Ms. Merritt. Given Ms. Merritt's prominence, and given Mr. Reed's history of financial strain and his sudden recent acquisition of liquid capital just 8 weeks before their first meeting, Mrs. Holt felt a moral obligation out of respect for Ms. Merritt standing in the business community to ensure that Ms. Merritt was fully informed of the circumstances surrounding Mr. Reed's present situation. There was a phone number at the bottom. Mrs. Holt, with the letter concluded, make herself available at Ms. Merritt's convenience. Diane read the letter 3 times. She did not cry. She did not call Sandra. She did not call Nathan. Not call Sandra. She did not call Nathan. She placed the letter flat on her desk, lined up precisely with the edge of her blotter, and she sat with it for 22 minutes. The letter was, of course, not a warning. She knew it even then. She had read too many documents over 12 years not to recognize a hostile filing when one landed in front of her. The language was too careful. The detail about the timing of the inheritance was too specifically weaponized. The invitation to call at her convenience was the move of a woman who wanted the other woman to call. But knowing that a letter was an attack did not by itself make the numbers inside it untrue. $350,000. Early September. 8 weeks before Nathan Reed had first walked across a downtown restaurant floor in a sawdust-dusted shirt. Diane Merritt had built a company on a single principle. When a deal looked too clean, there was always a second page. She had survived the Marcus years by teaching herself to read the second page before she signed. She chose that afternoon to believe the letter, not because she trusted Patricia Holt. She did not. She understood almost without effort what had happened. A woman who had lost in probate, turning over whatever small stones she could still find, hoping one of them would land hard enough to dislodge something. This was not a warning. This was a spite move produced on expensive letterhead. Diane still chose to believe it, because the letter was easier than the other thing. The other thing required her to believe that a man had walked into her life and wanted nothing from her. The other thing required her to stop defending herself. The other thing required her to be someone she had not yet figured out how to be. The letter required nothing from her at all except the one thing she already knew how to do. She picked up the phone. He answered on the second ring. Nathan. Diane. She used her contract voice. It was flat, courteous, precisely modulated. It was the voice she used when she told a commercial tenant that their lease would not be renewed. "I've been thinking," she said. "I don't think this is going to work. I've enjoyed the last few months. I think we're looking for different things, and I don't want to take up more of your time than I already have. I wish you well." On the other end of the line, nothing. No sharp breath. No shift. "All right, Diane," he said. His voice was not angry. It was not wounded. It was tired in the exact way a man was tired at the end of a long day in a workshop, when a joint he had trusted all week split along the grain. if that's what you need." And then he was the one who hung up first. Diane sat at her desk, the phone still warm in her hand, and listened to the silence of a building that employed 47 people. And beyond that, the silence of a city of nearly 3 million, none of whom at that moment knew that she had just ended in under 90 seconds the only thing in 8 years that had required her to be something other than careful. She had ended it cleanly. She had protected herself. She had done precisely the thing he had once said he would never do. Outside her window, the Chicago afternoon moved forward without her. The river beneath the Wacker Drive bridge was the color of pewter. A water taxi slid past small yellow Determined. Somewhere south of the loop, in a brick shop in Berwyn, a man she would not see again was picking up a hand plane and beginning, she imagined, to shave a long curl of wood from a length of cherry, because the work was the only thing he had ever been able to count on. She put the letter from Kirkland Brown and Associates into the top drawer of her desk, where she kept the documents she did not yet know how to feel about. She closed the drawer. She went back to work. And the part of her that had begun on a Sunday morning at a Formica counter to wonder what a life might look like if she were not always calculating, that part of her went very quiet and did not speak again for the rest of the week. The first 3 days, she was fine. She went to work. She closed a lease on the vacant floor of the Washington Building, a small architectural firm exactly as Nathan had predicted, though she did not let herself sit with that fact for more than a second. She had dinner on Tuesday with a developer from Houston who ordered a $40 steak and spent the entire meal explaining to her, with the patient condescension of a man who had Googled her on the way over, how commercial real estate worked in secondary markets. She nodded at the correct intervals. She did not laugh. On Wednesday evening, she came home to her penthouse on East Lake Shore Drive, and the apartment was wrong. Nothing had moved. The cleaner had come that morning. The marble kitchen island was polished to a soft shine. The orchids on the dining table had been refreshed. The thermostat was set to 68 degrees, exactly as she preferred. The apartment was flawless, and it was wrong, and she could not at first locate what was wrong about it. She stood in the kitchen for 20 minutes. She had not turned on a light. The city below her was doing its slow, pointillist work. Headlights along the drive, the red crown of the Hancock, the dark mass of the lake absorbing everything. From her kitchen window at this hour, Chicago was a painting she had bought for herself over 12 years and had never quite learned to look at. She realized standing there that she had been in this kitchen almost every evening for 4 years, and that in all 4 of those years, there had never once been another person in it. It had not bothered her before. She did not know what to do with the fact that it bothered her now. On Thursday evening, she called Sandra. She did not say much. She said she had ended it. And she said the word ended the way she would have said it, about a quarterly contract. Sandra listened, the way a good friend listens to a sentence she can already tell is not the whole sentence. "Diane," Sandra said at last, "do you want me to tell you were right, or do you want me to tell you the truth? The truth. Then come over tomorrow. I am not doing this on the phone." Diane did not go. She did not call back. She went instead back to the silence of the penthouse and found that it was worse now that someone who loved her had declined to agree with her. At 2 in the morning, she got out of bed, walked barefoot across the cool wood floor to the walk-in closet, and took down from the top shelf a small cherrywood box she had not opened in 6 years. It had been a gift in the first year before she had known. She had kept it anyway, because throwing it away would have meant allowing Marcus to cost her one more thing, and she had decided a long time ago that he had cost her enough. She had emptied the cruel contents, letters, photographs, a ring she had returned, and used the box afterward to hold the small paper artifacts of her recovery. The card from the therapist she had stopped seeing after 6 months, the business card of the attorney who had finally closed the last of the lawsuits. A single folded page on which, at the therapist's suggestion, She had written down what she wanted her life to look like when the worst of it was over. She had not read the page since the day she wrote it. She read it now, sitting on the floor of her closet at 2:15 in the morning in the pale light of the closet sconce. The handwriting was younger than hers. The sentences were careful and brave in the way sentences were brave when a woman was still bleeding. I want to trust someone again. I want to come home to a person and not an apartment. She read the page twice. She understood then what the therapist had meant when she had said in their last session that Diane was not actually healing, that she was simply building a structure around the wound and learning to live inside the structure. Diane had disagreed at the time. She had left the practice the following week and congratulated herself on the cleanness of the break. The therapist had been right. Diane had not recovered from Marcus. She had fortified against him, and she had spent 8 years mistaking the walls for a life. She folded the page. She put it back in the box. She walked into her office, sat down at her desk, and took the letter from Kirkland Brown and Associates out of the top drawer. She read it this time, not as a woman. She read it as herself, as the woman who signed leases, negotiated easements, spotted the buried clause in a 140-page operating agreement. The language of the letter read by that woman was grotesque. The phrase "ordinary course of its inquiries" meant nothing. No legitimate firm conducted inquiries into the personal lives of the adversaries of former clients. The phrase had been inserted to provide the appearance of legal machinery around what was in substance a rumor delivered on letterhead. The detail about the timing of the inheritance was presented as fact, but was strictly a correlation a 9-year-old could construct. The invitation to call at her convenience was the signature move of a litigant who wanted desperately to be telephoned back because every new call was a new chance to enlarge the grievance. This was not a warning. It was not even really a threat. It was a woman who had lost a probate case, sitting in a rented office in Naperville, rifling through the lives of the winners, looking for a lever. Diane's name had turned up in the local society pages, attached to a real estate story. The lawyer had drafted the letter on an afternoon when billable hours were slow. She had seen a dozen letters like it in her career. She had thrown every one of them away. She had not thrown this one away. She had believed it. She had believed it because believing it had allowed her to do cleanly, and under the cover of prudence, the thing she had been looking for an excuse to do for weeks. And the thing she had been looking for an excuse to do was to end the relationship before the relationship could require her to be someone other than the woman she had become. Nathan had named it in the parking lot under the yellow street light. "I am not going to spend my life convincing you I am not the man you are afraid of." She had not been afraid of Nathan. She had been afraid of the version of herself that did not need a letter like this to exist. She did not sleep the rest of the night. At 6 in the morning, she stood in her kitchen with a cup of coffee she did not drink, watching the March sun come up gray over Lake Michigan. At 7, she called the office and told her assistant to cancel the day. All of it. The 9:30 call with the lender. The 11 o'clock site walk in Logan Square. The afternoon she had been keeping clear for a quarterly review that she could, she decided quite easily, hold on Monday. At 7:40, she was in her car. Berwyn was a 30-minute drive on a clear morning. She did not put on music. She drove west along the Eisenhower in the early commuter light, the skyline shrinking in her mirror, the neighborhoods changing under her wheels, the brick 3-flats, the taquerias, the small, honest streets of a suburb that had been a working town since before she was born. His shop was on a side street off Curramack. She had never been there. She had only known the name and a general neighborhood, and the one photograph he had once shown her on his phone, a long, low brick building with a hand-painted sign over the door. "Reed Fine Woodworking." She found it on the first pass. His truck was parked in the lot. She sat in her car for 7 minutes. She did not know what she was going to say. She had run an $80 million company for 12 years on the principle that one did not enter a negotiation without a prepared opening. She entered this one without one. She got out of the car, The shop smelled of cedar and coffee, and the faint, sharp note of mineral spirits. The front room was small and full of pieces in progress. A half-finished rocking chair, a stack of walnut boards leaned against the wall, a long workbench under the window, with hand tools laid in precise order. Through an open doorway, she could hear the low thrum of a machine, and beneath it, a radio playing something she did not recognize. He came through the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. He saw her. His face did not change. Diane. I was wrong. She said it before he could say anything else, before he could ask her to leave, before she could lose the nerve she had only just now discovered she had. She said it standing in the middle of his shop in a wool coat, worth more than his truck, holding her car keys in her bare hand, with nothing prepared. About the letter, about the phone call, about the reason I made the phone call. I was wrong about all of it, and I owe you more than that sentence. But that sentence is the one I came here to say first. He set the rag down on the workbench. I got a letter, she said, from a lawyer in Naperville, representing Patricia Holt. It told me what you had inherited and when, and it suggested, in the careful way those letters suggest things, that you had walked into that restaurant because you knew what I was worth. I read it 3 times. I told myself I was reading it as a professional. I wasn't. I was reading it as an excuse, because I had been looking for one since the Sunday you brought Ellie to the diner, and that letter was the first one clean enough to use. He was very still. I have spent the last 8 years, she said, telling myself that I was a woman who had recovered from something. I hadn't. I had built walls around it, and I had called the space inside the walls a life, and I had gotten very good at defending it. And the thing I was most afraid of was not that you were going to hurt me. The thing I was most afraid of was that if I let you in, I was not going to know who I was anymore. Because for 8 years, I have been the woman who doesn't let anyone in. That was the whole definition. And I did not know, I still don't entirely know who I am without it. The radio played low behind him. I am not asking you to forgive me, she said. I am telling you that the phone call I made was the worst thing I have done in a long time, and that I owe you the truth about why I made it. That is all I came here for. If you want me to leave, I will leave. He looked at her for a long time. He did not come closer. He did not touch her. He leaned against the edge of the workbench, crossed his arms, and looked at her. The way a man looks at a piece of wood he is deciding whether he can still save. I'm not a man who keeps score, Diane, he said at last. If I were, this would be a different conversation. But I am also not a man who is going to walk into anything halfway. I know. I am going to tell you the only terms I have. If you cannot agree to them, I would rather know today. All right. Equal. He said the word plainly. Your company does not walk into this room. My hands do not walk into this room. We do not spend the next 2 years with you flinching every time I ask you a question, and we do not spend them with me proving something I should not have to prove. If you want to come back, you come back as yourself, and you let me be myself, and whatever we build, without one of us standing above the other. If you can do that, I am willing. I can do that. Take a week. Think about it. Do not answer me this morning. I don't need a week. Take it anyway. She nodded. She drove home. She took the week. On the 3rd day, she had lunch with Sandra and told her everything. And Sandra, for once in their friendship, did not say a single clever thing, only listened. And at the end, reached across the table and put her hand over Diane's and didn't let go. On the 8th day, Diane drove back to Berwyn. They began again. It was not dramatic. There was no reunion scene at the diner, no standing in the rain, no declaration. They simply resumed slower than before, and the slowness was the point. She did not announce anything. Neither did he. She began tentatively to arrive places without a plan. She sat on the porch he had built with his own hands at the small house in Berwyn and watched Ellie ride a bicycle in uneven loops around the driveway. One afternoon, Ellie stopped her bike beside the porch, leaned her elbows on the railing, and asked Diane with the flat seriousness only a 7-year-old can produce whether it was true that Diane had a building with her name on it. Diane said it was. Ellie considered this and then said she thought that was nice, but that the porch was better because you could sit on it. Then she pedaled off. Diane did not answer emails for the rest of the afternoon. She learned that Nathan made pancakes badly and did not care. She learned that Ellie had opinions about syrup. She learned that the porch in the late light was in fact better than a building. In April, she invited him to the penthouse for the first time. He came straight from the shop. A small carpenter's rule was still tucked into the chest pocket of his work shirt. He had forgotten it was there. He cooked a simple meal in her kitchen: chicken rice, a green salad with too much vinegar, and he moved through her imported cabinets and her sub-zero refrigerator with the unbothered ease of a man who did not need a room to belong to him before he could be comfortable in it. She watched him from the island. He was humming very quietly, along with something on the radio she had not known she owned. She understood then what she had not understood at 2 a.m. with a folded page in her lap. The life she had built was full. Her calendar was full. Her accounts were full. The penthouse was full of beautiful things she had chosen herself. It was also very, very small. What she had begun to have with this man, the small, slow thing, unnamed, undeclared, did not need a name to be real. It did not need a ring or a lease or a quarterly report. She had spent 43 years measuring everything. She stood in her kitchen, looking at a man with sawdust on his forearms and a carpenter's rule in his pocket, stirring rice in a copper pot he had found on the second shelf without being told where to look. She did not measure what she felt. She simply let it be what it was. And for the first time in her life, that was enough.